Martha Jenkins had always trusted her skin. At 67, she knew every line, every freckle, every small scar that carried the memory of a life well lived. So, when a small rash appeared on her wrist one Sunday morning, she did what everyone tells seniors to do these days. She used technology. Her granddaughter had shown her a new phone app that claimed it could read skin conditions using artificial intelligence. You just take a picture and get instant results. Martha liked the idea. She hated long clinic waits, and this sounded easy. She sat by the window, sunlight falling across her arm, and took a photo. Within seconds, the app replied, "Mild irritation, nothing serious." Good, she thought, probably just from the dish soap. She rubbed on some lotion and went about her day. A week later, the rash was still there. It itched more, darker around the edges. She took another photo. The app blinked and showed the same message. Mild irritation, keep area clean. 2 more weeks passed. The spot had spread halfway up her forearm, warm and sore to touch. She could not sleep from the burning. When her daughter finally drove her to the clinic, the doctor looked at her arm and frowned. "This should have been treated earlier," he said. "It looks like an autoimmune flare." Martha stared at him. "I used an app," she said. "It told me it was nothing." The doctor sighed. "Those tools are not always accurate, especially on darker skin." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "They are trained mostly on lighter skin tones. Sometimes they miss things." Martha felt her stomach drop. "So the machine thought my skin was too dark to be sick?" The doctor hesitated. It just did not recognize what it was seeing. That night, she could not stop thinking about his words, "too dark to be sick." She sat on her bed, looking at the reflection of her arm in the small mirror on her dresser. The rash looked angry now, red and deep. She remembered her mother saying, "Never ignore what your body tells you." But she had, because the machine said she was fine. 2 days later, she went back to the clinic for tests. The results showed inflammation that could have been treated weeks earlier. The doctor prescribed medicine and told her it would take time to heal. Martha asked if he had seen others like her. "More than you think," he said. "These apps often work fine for people with fair skin, but for people like you and me, they can miss early signs." "So it was not just me," she said. "No," he replied quietly. "You just happened to catch it before it got worse." On her way home, she stopped at the pharmacy to pick up her medicine. On the counter sat a stand advertising the same app she had used. The display read, "Instant results, clinically tested, trusted worldwide." Martha stared at the smiling faces in the pictures. None of them looked like hers. She asked the clerk if the app worked for everyone. "I guess so," the young man said. "It is popular." She nodded, but said nothing. At home, she opened her phone and looked at the last photo she had taken of her rash. The image on the screen looked smooth, almost healthy. The camera light had washed away the dark tones that showed how serious it really was. The app saw clear skin. She saw the truth. Her granddaughter called later that night. "Grandma, how did it go?" Martha told her everything. The girl was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I am sorry, Grandma. I did not know it could be wrong." "It is not your fault, baby. It is just strange," Martha replied. "I thought the future was supposed to help us see better, not worse." She turned off her phone and looked at her arm again. The medicine was working slowly, but the skin was still tender. She thought about the word the doctor used, trained. The machine had been trained, but not on her. Someone somewhere had decided what healthy skin looked like and left hers out of the lesson. That night she wrote one line in her small notebook. "If a tool can see sickness in others, but not in me, maybe the problem is not my skin, Maybe it is the way the world looks at it. She closed the notebook and whispered to herself. The app saw clear skin. I saw a problem. Guess which one was right?
When Martha's arm began to heal, she decided she needed to understand what had gone wrong. She had always believed in common sense. If something fails you, find out why. So she went back to the source, the app on her phone. She opened it and scrolled through the menus. There was a page titled How It Works. The description said, "Our advanced AI compares your skin photo with thousands of images to detect possible conditions." Martha read the words twice. Thousands of images. She wondered whose faces and arms filled those pictures. Her daughter Tanya came over that evening and found her sitting at the table with her phone open and her glasses low on her nose. "Mama, what are you doing?" "Trying to understand this thing that fooled me," Martha said. Tanya sat beside her. She worked as a nurse, so she knew a little about how medical tools were built. "The app learns from pictures," she explained. "It looks for patterns in color, texture, and shape. If it has seen something before, it can recognize it again." Martha frowned. "And if it has not?" "Then it guesses," Tanya said softly. Guesses. The words sat heavy in the air. Martha had trusted a guess over her own body. The next day, Tanya printed an article from a health technology magazine. It said most AI dermatology apps use datasets built from online image libraries. 95% of those images came from light-skinned subjects. Martha shook her head. So they teach the computer what sickness looks like, but only on one kind of skin. "That is right," Tanya said. "And when your picture does not match that pattern, it thinks you are fine." Martha looked at her bandaged wrist. The rash had faded but left a darker mark. It was proof that her pain had been real, even when the computer could not see it. She asked, "Why would they build something that ignores so many people?" Tanya sighed. "It is not on purpose, Mama. It is because that is the data they had." Martha gave a small laugh. Not on purpose is how most unfair things start.
That weekend, her granddaughter Jasmine visited. She was studying computer science in college. "Grandma, let me explain it simply," Jasmine said. "Imagine the computer as a student in school. It learns from the examples the teacher gives. If the teacher only shows pictures of light skin, the computer thinks that is the only kind there is. So it is not smart," Martha said. "It is limited." "Exactly. It is not evil, Grandma. It is just blind to what it has never been shown." Martha nodded. "Then someone needs to show it." She thought back to the early years when she worked in a small clinic as a receptionist. She remembered doctors flipping through books of skin conditions to identify rashes. Those books rarely showed black skin either. Some of the doctors would tell her, "It looks different on darker tones, but the disease is the same." Maybe so, she thought now. But if you never learn how it looks, you might miss it altogether. She turned to Jasmine. "When you build those computers, make sure they see everyone." "I will, Grandma," Jasmine said with a smile. That night, Martha went online again. She read a research report that said AI tools in healthcare were improving fast, but fairness was still a problem. The authors wrote, "Inclusive data collection remains a major challenge, particularly for darker skin types." She closed the report and whispered, "Inclusive. That means seeing us." The app Martha used was not broken. It worked exactly as designed. But design without diversity is another form of neglect. Technology meant to help can still harm when it forgets who it is supposed to serve. Before bed, Martha wrote in her notebook, "Machines do not have eyes, only memory. If the memory is incomplete, so is the care." She paused, then added another line. "I trusted a system built on pictures that never looked like me. Next time, I will trust my own reflection first."
Martha kept thinking about what her granddaughter said. The computer only knows what it has been shown. That thought followed her everywhere, in the grocery line, on her evening walks, even while watching the news. It reminded her of school days in the 1950s when the textbook showed only pale faces and called them the standard. Maybe nothing had changed after all, she thought. The only difference now was that the lesson had moved from the classroom into a machine. A week later, Tanya took her to a community health talk at the library. A young doctor was giving a presentation on how artificial intelligence was being used in medicine. He showed colorful slides filled with graphs and photos of happy patients. When the talk ended, Martha raised her hand. "Doctor," she said, "do these systems learn from people of all colors?" The doctor looked surprised, then honest. "Not always, ma'am. Most of the data we have comes from older studies." "Older studies of who?" "Mostly people from Europe and North America," he admitted. Martha folded her arms. "So the computer learned what disease looks like from people who do not look like me?" He nodded, a little embarrassed. "That is true." She gave a small smile. "Then maybe that is why it missed my rash." The audience chuckled softly, but her tone stayed serious. The doctor replied, "You might be right. The problem is not the AI. It is the history that built it." On the way home, Martha thought about that word again. History. She remembered how her mother used to say that even pain looked different on black skin. It was a lesson passed down quietly, like family recipes and church songs. Back then, many hospitals did not even keep proper records for black patients. Some symptoms were ignored or misdiagnosed. Those missing records meant that when scientists started building their big databases, a whole generation of people like her was simply not there. The computer had inherited that blindness. At home, she opened her notebook. She wrote, "The machine never forgot us. It never learned us." She drew a small box under the words and filled it with dots to represent faces. Then she shaded half of them gray. Underneath, she wrote, "Only half of us made it into the system." Later, her granddaughter called from college. "Grandma, did you know there is a project called Equity in Skin Data? It is trying to collect photos of all skin tones to train future models." Martha felt a small light in her chest. "That is good, baby. The world should not depend on a computer that only knows one shade of health." "Grandma," Jasmine said, "do you want to help? They're asking for volunteers to share real stories about how they were misdiagnosed." Martha smiled. "I think I have one story to tell." Every algorithm has a memory, and that memory is built from the past. If the past was unequal, the technology will be too. Bias is not a bug in the system, it is an echo of history. The next Sunday at church, Martha told her friends what she had learned. A few nodded knowingly. One woman said her smartwatch often showed low oxygen when she felt fine, but her doctor told her the device did not read well through dark skin. Martha told them, "It is not just you. The computer is using a history that never saw us clearly." That night, she sat quietly, holding her healed arm. The scar was lighter now, but still visible. It reminded her of a small truth she would carry forever. Technology may be new, but the story behind it is old. She looked out the window and whispered, "We were invisible on paper. Now we are invisible in code." Then she picked up her pen and wrote her next line. "If we want machines to see us, we have to teach them ourselves." Next, Martha begins her search for accountability and discovers that the policies behind these tools were written without the people they were meant to protect.
Martha's rash had healed, but she was not ready to let the story fade. She wanted answers. Someone had built that app, sold it to hospitals, and called it safe. Somewhere, she thought, a person had decided that skin like hers was an afterthought. She began with an email. "To whom it may concern," she typed, "I used your skin app and it failed to identify a serious condition because my skin tone was not represented. I would like to know what your testing process includes." The reply arrived 3 days later. "Dear Miss Jenkins, we are sorry to hear about your experience. Our AI is designed to provide assistance, not diagnosis. We follow all international standards and are confident in our product's performance across a wide population." "A wide population," she murmured. That phrase again. She wrote back, "Does that wide population include people who look like me?" The company did not reply. At her next checkup, she showed the email to Dr. Hill. He read it and sighed. That is their way of saying they met the basic rules. The rules just do not require much. What do you mean? There are no federal laws that force them to test these tools on different skin tones, he explained. If the app works on most users, it is approved. Martha frowned. And who decides what most means? He smiled sadly. People who have never been ignored by a machine. Later, she called her insurance company to ask if they endorsed the app. The representative said yes, it was listed as a recommended health aid in their plan. She asked if they knew it was less accurate on darker skin. The man hesitated. "I am not aware of that information, ma'am, but I can note your concern." "A note," she repeated. "A note does not fix a problem." The next Sunday, she brought her story to the senior group at church. They were used to talking about aches and medicine, but this time she spoke about data and policy. She told them about the emails, the silence, and how no one seemed responsible. One man raised his hand. "So if the system forgets us, who do we tell?" "Everyone," she said. "Tell your doctor, tell your insurance, tell the news." Her voice trembled with quiet anger. Policy stays still until someone shakes it. That week, she sent copies of her letters to a local consumer advocate. 2 weeks later, a small note appeared in the newspaper under health briefs. It said a complaint had been filed about medical bias in digital health tools. It did not name her, but she knew it was hers. Tanya clipped the piece and pinned it to the refrigerator. "See, Mama, now it is in print. That means it matters." Martha smiled. Paper can hide silence, but it can also carry truth. A month later, a lawyer from the advocacy group called. "Miss Jenkins, would you be willing to speak at a public meeting about fairness in medical technology?" She hesitated. "I am not a scientist." "You are the proof," he said. "People listen to that." So she agreed. At the meeting, she stood behind a wooden podium. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "I trusted a tool that said it could see sickness. It did not see mine because it was never taught to. That is not my mistake. That is a system's mistake." When she finished, the audience clapped softly. A young woman from the health department thanked her. "We will review the current approval guidelines," she promised. Martha knew that was bureaucratic talk, but even small steps meant someone was finally listening. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Policy is written by people who never met me, but policy can be changed by people who have."
She underlined the words twice. Then she added another line. Silence is a policy too. Martha's fight was no longer about one app. It was about a system that treated fairness as optional. But her voice was beginning to travel from kitchen tables to conference rooms. Next, she follows the paper trail even deeper and learns how medicine's blind spot was built and protected for decades.
Martha had spent her life believing that paper did not lie. She came from a generation that trusted what was written down. Bills, birth certificates, marriage licenses. Paper meant truth. But lately, she had learned something different. Paper could hide truth just as easily as it told it. After her meeting with the lawyer, she asked how she could see the testing records for the app that misread her skin. He explained that by law those records were public. She just had to request them from the Food and Drug Administration. So she did. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived in her mailbox. Inside were pages of technical language and dense tables of numbers. The first line read, AI Dermatology System, Approval Summary. She ran her finger down the first page and found a section called Testing Population. It listed participants 1,200, skin types Fitzpatrick I to 3. She frowned. The words meant nothing to her. She called her granddaughter Jasmine. "Baby, what does this Fitzpatrick thing mean?" Jasmine looked it up on her laptop. "Grandma, those are skin tone categories. Types I to 3 are light to medium. Yours would be type V or VI." "So I am not even on this paper," Martha said quietly. She turned to the next page. Under Limitations, it said, "Performance may vary across pigmentation levels." May vary. That phrase again. Polite words for possible failure. She whispered to herself, "So they knew." Martha took the papers to Dr. Hill. He looked them over and nodded slowly. "This line here," he said, "means they passed approval even though they never tested it on darker skin. How is that possible?" He sighed. "The rules only require them to prove that it works for most patients." "Most again," she said, the same word hiding behind everything. He nodded. "They define most based on the data they already have, not the people they forgot."
That night, Martha spread the pages across her kitchen table. There were charts with lines and percentages, pictures of sample results, and bold statements like, "meets all international standards." She circled one sentence at the bottom of a page. Dataset sourced primarily from European hospitals. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, "Europe is not the world." She thought of her church friends, her family, the seniors who had trusted these same tools. None of them were in this dataset. None of them were represented in the charts. Yet those charts decided who got the right diagnosis and who did not. The next day, she showed the papers to her daughter Tanya. Tanya read quietly, then said, "It is not that they lied. They just never thought we would look this closely." Martha smiled. "Then it is time somebody did." She made a folder labeled Proof and placed the papers inside. Then she added the company's email, her complaint letter, and the newspaper clipping about her case. When Jasmine stopped by that evening, Martha showed her the folder. "Grandma, you are building your own archive," she said. Martha laughed. "No, baby, I am building a mirror. So the next time they say the system is fair, I can show them what fairness leaves out." A few days later, the advocacy lawyer called. "We are gathering these documents from different patients, Miss Jenkins. Your folder helps show a pattern." She felt a quiet pride. Her kitchen table had become a small office of justice. The paper trail of modern medicine tells two stories.
one in bold print for the public, and one in fine print for those willing to look closer. When systems fail, the truth hides between those lines. Before bed, Martha wrote in her notebook again. Paper is powerful. It can deny or it can defend. The difference is who is holding the pen. Then she underlined the next line twice. If the paperwork never includes your color, your pain becomes invisible ink. Next, Martha learns that the problem reaches far beyond one company or device. Across the country, others begin to speak up. And together, their stories form a new kind of record, one that medicine cannot ignore.
It started with one app on Martha's phone, but by spring, she realized it was everywhere. The local news ran a short segment about bias in medical technology. They mentioned pulse oximeters that gave false readings on darker skin, heart monitors that missed signs in black women, and skin scanners that misdiagnosed rashes and cancers. She sat on her couch, shaking her head slowly. They make all these tools, she said to herself, and somehow we keep getting left out. Her daughter Tanya called after seeing the same segment. "Mama, did you hear that report? They are talking about exactly what happened to you." "I did," Martha said. "Looks like I was not alone after all." A few days later, she attended a community meeting organized by the Senior Health Advocacy Group. The room was full of familiar faces, mostly older black men and women. A speaker stood at the front and said, "If you have ever used a device or app that gave you wrong results, please raise your hand." Half the room lifted their hands. One woman said her heart monitor kept showing low risk, even though she later needed surgery. Another man said his oximeter read normal, while his doctor rushed him into treatment for low oxygen. Martha listened quietly, her chest heavy with recognition. When it was her turn to speak, she told them about the Skin app, about the polite emails, and about the papers that proved she had been excluded. The crowd murmured. Someone said, "They call it technology, but it sounds like history repeating itself." Martha nodded. That is exactly what it is. After the meeting, a volunteer named Ruth approached her. "Miss Jenkins, we are collecting stories to send to a national watchdog group," she said. "We want regulators to see that this is not just a glitch, it is a pattern." Martha handed her a copy of her folder. "Add mine," she said. Ruth smiled. "You are the kind of witness we need." A month later, the group released a report called When Health Tech Forgets Us. Martha's story was included as Case 14. The report made headlines across several states. It said that over 70% of major AI health tools had not been properly tested on darker skin. When Martha read the number, she felt both angry and vindicated. She showed the article to Tanya. 70%, she said. That means 7 out of 10 of these so-called smart tools do not see us right? Tanya nodded. It is bigger than one company now, Mama. Martha thought about the faces from the meeting, all those raised hands. Each one was a missing piece of data, a silent story now coming to light. Soon after, a journalist called her for an interview. He asked what she wanted people to take from her story. Martha answered plainly, I just want fairness to be part of design, not an afterthought. He asked if she blamed the technology. No, she said. I blame the people who built it and never thought to test it on someone like me. When the article came out, it was titled The Bias Hidden in the Code. Martha's picture appeared beside the headline, a close-up of her hands holding her phone. The caption read, A grandmother from Louisiana who taught medicine to look again. Her church group cheered when they saw it. Even Dr. Hill called to say he had printed the story for his office bulletin board. It felt strange to be called a symbol, but Martha accepted it. If her mistake could save someone else from the same pain, then it was worth it.
When one story is dismissed as an exception, it stays small. But when many voices join together, exceptions become evidence. Evidence changes rules. That evening, Martha sat on her porch, watching the sunset. She thought about the machine that could not read her skin and about all the others that would soon be built. She whispered, "Do not forget us this time." Then she wrote a note in her notebook. When silence becomes a crowd, the system starts to listen. Next, Martha learns that real reform is coming. She is invited to speak with people who build these tools and discovers that sometimes the fastest way to fix a blind system is to let those it ignored lead the way.
By summer, Martha's name had begun to travel further than she ever imagined. The advocacy group she worked with received an invitation from a health technology conference in Atlanta. They wanted her to share her experience during a panel on fairness in AI. At first, she laughed. "Me? At a conference? I have never even used a PowerPoint." Her granddaughter Jasmine grinned. "You do not need slides, Grandma. You just need your story." So she went. The conference hall was cold and bright. Rows of people in business suits and white badges filled the seats. Martha sat quietly on stage beside a panel of doctors, engineers, and a young man who introduced himself as a developer for one of the biggest medical AI companies in the country. When it was her turn to speak, she stood and held the microphone with both hands. "I am not a scientist," she said. "I am a patient, but I think that should be enough to be seen." The room went silent. She told them about the app that called her rash mild, about the papers that excluded her skin type, about the emails that said wide population. When she finished, she said softly, "I am not asking for miracles. I am asking that you remember my color is not an error code." The young developer on the panel looked down at his notes. Later, when the session ended, he approached her. "Miss Jenkins," he said, "I want to apologize. I work on a system that uses those same datasets. We never meant to ignore anyone." Martha smiled kindly. "I believe you, son, but good intentions do not heal infections." He nodded slowly. "You were right. Maybe you could help us fix it." She raised her eyebrows. "Help you?" "Yes, we are starting a diversity data project. We want to include real photos of darker skin conditions, and we need community partners. Would you join as an advisor?" She laughed softly. "You sure you want an old lady with no tech degree?" He smiled. "We need people who understand what happens when the numbers go wrong."
A few months later, Martha joined their team. She sat in meetings where people used big words like algorithm and bias audit, but she made sure they remembered the plain ones too: fairness, dignity, care. Whenever someone said, "The model performs well overall," she asked, "For who?" When they said, "We will add diversity later," she replied, "Later is how we got here." The developers began to listen. They collected thousands of new photos from clinics across the country: brown skin, dark skin, every shade between. For the first time, the database looked like the real world. The company released a new version of its app with a simple sentence on the home screen: "Trained on all skin tones." It seemed small, but to Martha, it felt huge. She remembered holding the old version months ago, the one that saw clear skin and said nothing was wrong. Now the same tool could finally see her. At the launch event, the young developer thanked her publicly. This project started with a woman who refused to stay invisible. Martha smiled, but corrected him. "It started with a rash. It grew because you listened." Later that night, she called Tanya. "I think I'm finally starting to understand something," she said. "The machine was never the enemy. The enemy was comfort. People got too comfortable thinking their way worked for everyone." Tanya agreed. "You reminded them it does not." Martha nodded.
Maybe now they will remember before the next mistake. Real change begins when the people once left out become part of the process. Technology does not need more speed. It needs more eyes. Eyes that see every shade of health. Before bed, Martha wrote in her notebook, "Who can fix it? The ones who were never supposed to. How can they fix it? By making sure no one else has to fight to be seen." She closed the notebook and whispered, "Tomorrow we keep teaching the machine." Next, Martha's story comes full circle. From confusion to courage, she finds peace in knowing that her scars became lessons and her voice turned into change that will outlive her.
A year after her rash first appeared, Martha stood in front of her bathroom mirror, rolling up her sleeve. Her skin had healed, but a faint shadow of the mark still showed. It was not ugly to her anymore. It was proof. Proof that she had been ignored. Proof that she had been heard. Proof that her story mattered. On the counter beside her sat 2 phones. One held the old app, the one that once said mild irritation. The other held the new version with a message at the top of the screen, trained on all skin tones. Martha smiled. Same company, same idea, but this one finally knew she existed. She opened her window, letting the morning light pour in. The sunlight hit her arm differently now. A year ago, she had worried that the light made her skin too dark for the camera to see. Today, she thought, let it see all of me. Later that week, she went to the community center where the advocacy group was hosting a workshop called Teach the Tech. Seniors gathered with their phones, tablets, and curiosity. Martha stood at the front table with her folder of documents and her small notebook. She told them, "I am not here to scare you. I am here to remind you to ask questions. Machines are smart, but they still need teachers, and that is us." The room filled with laughter and nods. She passed out copies of her new handout, titled The Guide to Be Seen. It was 1 page, written in large, clear print. 1. Compare what the app says with what your eyes see. 2. Ask if the technology was tested on darker skin. 3. Bring your questions to your doctor, not just your phone. 4. Share your experiences. They make the system stronger. 5. Remember, your body is not an error code. She looked around the room as people read each line. Some nodded slowly, others whispered, "Thank you."
That afternoon, she received a call from the young developer she had met at the conference. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, "I just wanted you to know your guide is being added to our official training program." She smiled. "So the teacher becomes part of the lesson." "Exactly," he said. "We owe you a lot." "You owe me nothing," she replied. "Just keep seeing people clearly." That night, her daughter Tanya and granddaughter Jasmine came over for dinner. They sat around the kitchen table, the same place where the story had begun. Tanya poured tea and said, "Mama, you know your name is in a new medical journal. They quoted you in an article about diversity in health tech." Martha laughed. "Imagine that! My words sitting next to science." Jasmine smiled. "Grandma, you changed the way they build the future." Martha looked at them both and said softly, "No, baby, we changed it." Every voice that refused to stay quiet helped. She reached for her old notebook and flipped to the first page where she had written her very first thought. "If a tool can see sickness in others but not in me, maybe the problem is not my skin." Below it, she added one last line in steady handwriting. "Now it can see me. That means it can heal me, too." Martha's story began with a small rash and a quiet trust in technology.
It ended with a lesson that spread far beyond her home. The next time someone opens an app or checks their health with a machine, her voice will be there, not in the code, but in the care behind it. Because fairness is not automatic. It has to be taught. As the screen fades, the camera lingers on Martha, sitting by her window, sunlight on her healed arm, her phone glowing softly on the table. Medicine should see every shade of health. Then a soft fade to black. If this story reminded you of someone you love, share it. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories When Data Meets Dignity for more true stories of courage, care, and change. And remember, your story might be the next one that helps the world see clearly.